I'm going to read some more from 200 Events That Shaped the Nation, What Every American Should Know About American History, by Dr. Alan Axelrod and Charles Phillips. So, I looked off here. The Pilgrims settled Plymouth, 1620. The event. 1620, rough seas off the coast of Nantucket evidently forced Captain Christopher Jones of the Mayflower to alter his course from the mouth of the Hudson River toward Cape Cod, where he deposited his passengers, including some 50 members of a religious sect, who would soon come to be called the Pilgrims, outside the jurisdiction of Virginia, much to the chagrin of those aboard who were not Pilgrims. The two groups settled their differences by signing a brief statement of self-government, drafted by the Pilgrims, which became known as the Mayflower Compact, the first written constitution in North America. Some claim the Pilgrims had bribed the good captain to alter his course. The Pilgrims had arranged a 9-month journey with the permission of the Virginia Company and the backing of London merchants, who charged the Plymouth Company, as the Pilgrims Corporation was known, a handsome interest on the funds they advanced the group. The Pilgrims were a sect of the Separatists, themselves a splinter group of the Puritans. The Puritans rejected the wordy ceremoniousness of the Church of England as too popish, and hoped to cleanse it of all traces of Roman Catholicism. Those Puritans who thought the Anglican Church too corrupt to be purified, wanted complete autonomy for their congregations. And the Pilgrims were so extreme in their separatist views that the English authorities banned them outright. Pilgrims who did not go underground fled the country, and a small band hailing from Scrooby, Nottinghamshire, settled in Leyden, Holland. There, though their theology was acceptable, their culture was alien, and the group at length opted for a second course, a fresh start in America. They struck their deal with the London merchants, hoping to establish the kingdom of God in the English colonies, but they took with them on the voyage a number of men faithful to the Church of England, whom they called strangers, and who had very different goals from otherworldly religious cult: to get rich, to own a bit of land, and to live a good life on the earth just as it was. Needless to say, the trip did not go smoothly, with the Pilgrims numbering only some 50 to 102 passengers on board when Captain Jones, for whatever reason, altered course. Some sort of arrangement was necessary to stave off a true mutiny, signing the compact in which they vowed to create a civil body politic and abide by laws created for the good of the colony as a whole, were some of the most headstrong and determined men in our history. Pilgrims like William Brewster, John Carver, Edward Winslow, and William Bradford. Strangers like Ship's Cooper, John Alden, and Army Captain Miles Standish. Pilgrim and stranger alike came ashore at the site of present-day Provincetown at the worst possible time. Winter was setting in, and nearly half of the colonists died before a supply ship arrived in the spring of 1621. The Pilgrims viewed as a blessing from God the appearance of Squanto and Samoset, local Indians who had learned English from earlier explorers and helped the Pilgrims plant crops and build their homes. In the fall of 1621, the Pilgrims and their Native American friends gathered to celebrate the harvest, the event that is commemorated yearly on Thanksgiving. I always thought that was a myth. That wasn't real. But what do I know? After the colony's original governor died during the first harsh winter in the New World, the settlers selected William Bradford as his replacement. A wise and equitable citizen ruler, Bradford was also an able chronicler. His history of Plymouth Plantation recounts a separatist life in Holland and in the New World, and was the first instance in which the English settlers were called pilgrims. Among the struggles Bradford examined in his book was one between the pilgrims and the particulars. These individuals had paid their own way to the New World, and did not believe they were responsible for contributing to the payment due to the Virginia Company. In addition, the particulars wanted no part in the colony's work to raise funds to bring over more pilgrims, to end the quarrel between the two factions, and to relieve the colony of its mounting debts. A group of prosperous colonists agreed to assume the debts of the Virginia Company in exchange for greater access to the land and control of the fur trade. These men, known as the Undertakers, agreed to pay the Virginia Company £200 a year for 9 years. I think that's pounds. Yeah. As the years passed, more and more pilgrims and particulars flocked to the fledgling colony. Towns were created throughout the region of Plymouth. Each town had at least one church congregation, independent of all others and in strong control of the religious and secular lives of the townspeople. Only those individuals who freely professed their conversion were admitted to the congregation. But the pilgrims, unlike the neighboring Puritans in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, did not forbid the unconverted from participating in the colony's affairs. With the Mayflower Compact as a foundation, the pilgrims were able to develop the broad enfranchisement necessary for managing a colony that boasted any number of particulars and strangers, a toleration that would become the hallmark of American civil life. Puritans settled Massachusetts Bay, 1630 to 42. The event, the 1629 5 English ships bursting with Puritan imageries, sailed into Massachusetts Bay, the first of many that would bring to Britain's newest colony the 20,000-odd settlers who participated in the Great Puritan Migration. Mostly Anglican Puritans, these early arrivals were inspired by the New World success of more radical fellow countrymen, the Pilgrims, who had established their colony at Plymouth a decade earlier. The first Puritans founding Nomkig, later called Salem, and by the time John Winthrop arrived a year later, carrying a royal charter for a new joint stock venture called the Massachusetts Bay Company. 11 more ships had deposited 1,000 more Puritan immigrants. To Boston, which Winthrop founded and named after England's great Puritan city, they came to the thousands every year for 12 years, chased out their mother country by a king who grew ever more intolerant of their disputatiousness, their rigid morality, their grim industriousness, and their seditious religious ideology. No doubt about it, they were an argumentative lot, constantly fighting among themselves, usually over church matters, sometimes over land. Squabble by squabble, it seemed, they settled New England. The Puritan migration was uniquely one of families, and the institution of the family first and foremost provided coherence to Puritan social life. The father, absolute head of the Puritan household, ruled with an iron hand over his children, whose strict obedience was expected even after maturity. and his wife, who was by law his subordinate. Not surprisingly, the Massachusetts Bay Colony's General Court ruled early on that land would be granted not to individuals, but to groups of families in plots of 36 square miles per family. The importance Puritans placed on family also explains why they so quickly saw to educating their children, founding Boston's English High and Latin School, the first secondary school in America, in 1635, and Harvard College the following year. Puritan notions of family were also reflected in the social hierarchy of New England villages. Each town developed a group of leaders called town fathers, who were heads of certain families, were usually university trained or specially skilled in a craft, and who directed local affairs. But though the sons of the town fathers tended to inherit their power and influence, and though a handful of families monopolized local offices, the basis of local self-government was the town meeting, and the decisions of the town meeting required the unanimous agreement of every townsman. The New England Church, too, boasted elements of both the patriarchal family's tyranny and the town meeting's freedom. The law required village inhabitants in every state but Rhode Island to attend church on the Sabbath and to tithe. But church membership was voluntary, and each village church conducted its own affairs, answering to no higher secular authority. And while ministers exercised considerable informal influence over both public and private life, they were not permitted to participate in government. In the churches, as in the town meetings, the laity enjoyed ultimate authority. Ecclesiastically, the Puritans were as intolerant as the king they had fled. Politically, they were dangerous radicals, as the brethren they left behind in England proved in 1649, when Puritan champion Oliver Cromwell overthrew King Charles I and had him executed. The coming of the English Commonwealth would spell the end of the Puritan migration. Though English Puritans continued to settle in New England for a year or two in search for a better fortune than the tumultuous economy of the Glorious Revolution could offer them, by the time Connecticut, New Haven, Plymouth, and the Massachusetts Bay Colony formed the New England Confederation in 1643 in order to settle border disputes. The absolute dominance of the Puritans had begun to decline. Even today, however, Americans are affected by the strange mixture of social authoritarianism and political democracy that make up the Puritan legacy. Let me get some more tea. Roger Williams is exiled to Rhode Island. 1636. The event. In 1636, the radical religious zealot Roger Williams, whose preachments led Massachusetts Governor Roger Winthrop to banish him from Boston, founded Providence, Rhode Island. The same year, Reverend Thomas Hooker's relatively liberal standards for church membership encouraged him to lead another group into Connecticut and build Hartford. When Anne Hutchinson's radical interpretations of sermons began to draw huge, enthusiastic audiences, Winthrop branded her a heretic and banished her too from Boston. In 1638, she joined Williams in Rhode Island. Founding Portsmouth the same year, New Haven was established. The Reverend Roger Williams was a minister of the Puritan Church in Salem. Williams' belief in the separation of church and state, forced religion stinks in God's nostrils, he declared, was contrary to the Puritans' avowed goal of creating on earth a theocracy. godly community led by church members. Also contrary to Puritan orthodoxy was William's call for soul liberty, the freedom to be guided by one's own lights in choosing one's religion. William based his belief on his interpretation of Christ's teaching that religious truth and error coexist in all nations. Williams believed that because there was no way for any one group, including the Puritans, to determine absolutely what was religious truth, all groups should be tolerated. For his heterodoxy, Williams was brought before the Massachusetts General Court and found guilty of heresy and banished from the colony. He and his followers moved to the area around Narragansett Bay, where they established Providence in 1636. 7 years later, Williams received a royal charter for the new colony of Rhode Island. As leader of a new colony, Williams insisted on granting absolute religious freedom to all settlers. In addition, he insisted that the white settlers had no right to land in the colonies unless they bought it from the Native Americans. Because of his friendly relations with the Narragansetts, whom he respected and whose language he learned, Williams was himself freed from abiding by this moral imperative when a tribal council gave him as a gift the land on which he founded Providence. Although Williams tempered his views on soul liberty, in the 1670s, when a large number of Quakers migrated to Rhode Island, the colony was the first in New England to offer religious freedom to its inhabitants. This heritage of tolerance made the area attractive to immigrants and many origins and faiths in the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. Williams not only set an early example of the toleration of diverse beliefs that would become an American ideal, he was also far more successful than most colonial authorities in establishing peaceful relations between settlers and Indians. Unlike most Orthodox Puritans, he did not regard the Indians as benighted devil worshippers or even agents of the devil, but as human beings to be loved and respected. His key into the language of America, an account of his travels among the Narragansetts in the first American study of Indian language customs. Never heard of that guy. It's cool. Marquette and Joliet explored the Mississippi, 1673. How long is this? Yeah, I can read that. The event, 1673, two Canadian Frenchmen, Louis Joliet and Father Jacques Marquette, set off on a journey down the Mississippi River that would pave the way for French colonization of America between the Appalachian and Rocky Mountains. From the time Champlain founded Quebec in 1608, Coeur de Bois, and as casual with their lives as the most ferocious English sea dogs, and almost as good at woodscraft as the Indians, chased furs even deeper into the wilderness. In the wake came the French Catholic missionaries, hunting for souls and undaunted by the dangers of the forest. The hardy explorers and the Jesuits, dubbed Black Ropes by the Indians, built forts all along the far reaches of the lakes. To these remote outposts came the Indians with animal hides for sale and strange tales about a great father of rivers they called Mississippi. In 1673, the French intendant in Canada, Jean-Baptiste Talon, commissioned a fur trader named Louis Joliet to explore the unknown river described by the Indians. Talon hoped this father of waters might prove to be the fabled passageway to the Pacific. He had reason, however, to worry that the new governor, on his way over from France, might not approve his plan. Louis the 14th did not appreciate the exploits of his wandering subjects, and wanted his new France, which he had taken over from a trading company, populated by hard-working and docile farmers. 2 years before, the king had rejected another scheme by 2 different couriers to create a trading company that would service the northern fur supply by sea, using the never-to-be-discovered Northwest Passage, and forbidding all but a privileged few from engaging in a fur trade at all. In good order, he sent women to entice the wild trappers into a more settled life, placed a bounty on large families, and urged the church to excommunicate men who left their farms without permission. Spurned by their king, the 2 fur traders Pierre Esprit Radisson and Medard Chouart turned to the English and established the Hudson Bays Company. In 1672, arriving to take over the governor's chair the next year, Comte de Frontenac realized the strategic and economic importance of the nascent international competition, and he approved Talon's commissioned expedition without hesitation. In June, Joliet and a Jesuit priest named Jacques Marquette lowered their 2 birch bark canoes into the muddy water of the Mississippi. Marquette and Joliet reported many strange sights along the way. Fish so large they threatened to rip apart the canoes. Huge herds of grazing buffalo, wildly vivid Indian paintings a bit upstream from the mouth of the Missouri, but they never did find the Northwest Passage, nor did they find any silver or gold, the traditional impetus for European exploration, though not for want of trying. They turned back before they reached modern-day Arkansas, fearful of blundering into Spanish territory and causing an incident that might earn them the ire of their reluctant king. Marquette lingered behind in the wilderness to convert the natives, while Joliet dashed back to Quebec to report on their expedition. Scarcely 2 years later, the Jesuit was dead, broken by the rugged climate. Joliet, now a former explorer, grew embittered by the lack of recognition he believed he deserved, and he wandered from one minor government job to another for the rest of his life. The French crown never could decide what to do with Louisiana. Its original plan was to create an agricultural kingdom across the sea, resulted in a measure scattering the settlements of Nova Scotia along the St. Lawrence, and here and there Louisiana. In contrast, the divines and the trappers who traveled up and down the Mississippi filled the missionary zeal, or searching for precious metals and the non-existent Northwest Passage, explored and mapped one of the greatest river systems in the world, made peace with the majority of native inhabitants, and came to rule the wilderness. Their activities helped the French pioneers by increasing the trade with the Indians and more firmly establishing claim in the area, for unlike the French crown, they were in Louisiana to stay. So I'll stop there for today. Carry on with this next story next time I read from this book. So, hope that helped you fall asleep. Thank you for watching my videos.